We will begin with a chant. Om Vanme Manasi Pratishtita Mano Me Vachi Pratishtitam Haviraviramaheti Vedasya Nishtaha Shrutam Me Ma Prahasi Anena Ditena Oratran Sandadami Ritam Varishyami Satyam Varishyami Tanmamavatu Tadvaktaramavatu Bhavatu Mamavatu Vaktaram Om Shanti 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 Om. May my speech be one with my mind, and may my mind be one with my speech. O thou self-luminous Brahman, remove thy veil of ignorance before me, that I may behold thy light. Do thou reveal to me the spirit of the scriptures. May the truth of the scriptures be ever present to me. May I seek day and night to realize what I learned from the sages. May I speak the truth of Brahman. May I speak the truth. May it protect me. May it protect my teacher. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So friends, I'm very, very happy to be with you today after a long recess, but it was capped off at the very end by a beautiful retreat, Janmashtami retreat by our Swami Kripa Moyananda. So I'm glad that many of you were able to attend. This month, as you can see in our calendar on the website, is a whole series on the Bhagavad Gita. We're ending the Wisdom of the Gita series, and today will be chapter 17, Three Kinds of Faith. So if you do have the scripture with you, follow along with me. If not, it'll all be self-explanatory. At the end of the 16th chapter, Sri Krishna advises Arjuna, he who flouts the commandments of the scriptures and acts on the impulse of his desires cannot reach perfection or happiness or the highest goal. Let the scriptures be your guide, therefore, in deciding what you must do and what you must abstain from. First, learn the path of action, karma yoga, as the scriptures teach it, then act accordingly. All right, so what does this mean? In chapter 16, Sri Krishna had laid bare the sobering truth. There are two paths to follow, the path of dharma and truth, or the path of adharma and pleasure or self-seeking. And what does dharma mean? That which prevents the personality from disintegrating. A very strong word, a very beautiful word in our tradition. But if we take the help of the scriptures and a genuine guru from a reputed lineage, there's no fear that we may misdirect divine power that lies within us and fall from our goal. Now, why a teacher? Well, we go to school at a young age. If we wish to learn chemistry, do we not have a teacher? Otherwise, we could blow ourselves up in the laboratory with us. No, and so much more so in spiritual life. There's a tremendous power within each individual, and spiritual practice unleashes that power. And unless we have a guru, it can go astray. Scriptures and our teachers are here to remind us how to develop discrimination and adhere to the path of Dharma to find real happiness, self-actualization, and fulfillment. Otherwise, if we take the path of the pleasant, we'll eventually discover for ourselves that our pleasure seeking is never satisfied, and it never brings us real happiness. And even at a young age, we find that. No matter what we want, once we have it, we want more. It never stops. We're never satisfied. So sages encourage us, in the beginning, the path of the good may be difficult, but in the end, one attains a supreme goal. And so now we begin the 17th chapter. Arjuna asks, there are men who sacrifice to God with faith in their hearts, although they do not follow the instructions of the scriptures. What is the nature of that faith? Does it belong to sattva, or to rajas, or to tamas? These are the three gunas. And most of you who have been following in Vedanta understand what those gunas pertain to. They pertain to everything in this external world. They pertain to the mind, our personality, the types of actions that we undertake. Sri Krishna speaks to us in verses 2 through 4. Faith among human beings is of three kinds. It is characterized by sattva, or by rajas, or by tamas, according to a man's dominant tendencies. Now listen, we have to remember, Sri Krishna is talking to a man, so always the masculine pronoun is used. But in fact, he's talking to the world. He's talking to us. Always feel that the scripture is talking to me. The faith of each individual corresponds to his temperament, Sri Krishna says. A man consists of the faith that is in him. It's a very strong statement. Whatever his faith is, he is. Men whose temperament is dominated by sattva worship God in his various aspects. Men of rajas worship power and wealth. As for the rest, the men of tamas, they worship the spirits of the dead and make gods of the ghosts of their ancestors. Okay, so let's deconstruct this. This raises some fundamental questions within us. There are some very good people who wish to pursue spiritual life, but they have limited knowledge of the scriptures, or they don't have the curiosity, the thirst, or the favorable circumstances to study them. Now, will they grow in spiritual life, or will they remain static? Or will they fall away from their spiritual goal? Also, what is faith? And why should one have faith in the scriptures? Swami Nikhilananda, disciple of Holy Mother, and former head of the New York Center. We have two centers in New York, the East Side Center. He was a scholar. And he said scriptures contain the wisdom won by the collective experience of a race, its culture, religion, science, and progressive discovery of the best rule of life. And this wealth of knowledge is what captivated and drew Vivekananda's audiences in the West. In his talks, he made the scriptures living to us. Yes, he was an inspired teacher, no doubt. He was a prophet. He was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, the foremost disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, whose utterances were themselves scriptures. Yet, his historians remind us, he did not forsake the age-old Indian tradition in which all valid preaching is firmly laid on the foundation of the authentic Sanskrit scriptures. All of his utterances were scripture, but he never deviated from the essence of the scriptures, and yet he revitalized the Sanatana Dharma, the religion of the Hindus. What was the impact of that vast Vedanta body of culture, religion, and science he transmitted to his Western audience? Ella Wheeler Wilcox referred to her experience at one of Vivekananda's spiritual talks in 1895. She wrote in the New York American, the May 26, 1907 talk. We went out of curiosity, she and her husband, and before we had been 10 minutes in the audience, we felt ourselves lifted up into an atmosphere so rarefied, so vital, so wonderful, that we sat spellbound and almost breathless to the end of the lecture. And for months afterwards, we went to hear Swami Vivekananda explain the old religion and to gather from his wonderful mind jewels of truth and thoughts of helpfulness and strength. It was that terrible winter of financial disasters, she went on, when banks failed and stocks went down like broken balloons, and businessmen walked through the dark valleys of despair, and the whole world seemed topsy-turvy. We can relate to that. Just came out of a pandemic, 2-year pandemic. And she went on, we would go to hear the Swami lecture, and I would go back to my own duties and pleasures with the same uplifted sense of soul and enlarged vision. She concluded, when any philosophy, any religion can do this for human beings in this age of stress and strain, and when added to that, it intensifies their faith in God and increases their sympathies for their kind and gives them a confident joy in the thought of other lives to come. It is good and great religion. So these are the words that come from one whose faith was roused from the depths of her heart. It is usually personal desire that makes one resist the study of the scriptures. And what happens to those people? Depending on the character of the individual, that resistance may give rise to beneficial or harmful results. Not everyone comes into Vedanta with arms wide open. It's good to come with a questioning mind and to have questions. One of my first discoveries coming into Vedanta as a college student was, wow, not only does this religion invite questions, one must question. If you're a serious student, questions arise, and it is only then that we can carve our way into our spiritual life and progress. For example, there are those who are too lazy to follow scriptures, or because of a weak will cannot comply with their instructions, or due to ambition, they wish to be recognized as teachers, not students, in their own right. Now, here again, we must beware of those who profess spiritual experiences publicly. One of the great disciples of Holy Mother, Swami Asheshananda, who I had the blessed good fortune to spend just about every summer with, he said, those who claim have not had. So be on the alert for those who claim deep experiences or who wish to show you their spiritual prowess. But everyone has some kind of faith. It is just a question of faith in what? God or the world? Swami Pravrajika, and I'm going to be relying a lot on his commentary of the Gita, which is yet unpublished. He said, Sri Krishna points out that where our heart is, that is where our faith is. And if we stop to think, where is my heart? Where is my heart? And that is where my faith is. When our heart is centered in God, then we possess a genuine faith that stirs us to worship him. Faith is not simply belief or lip service without action. We are made of our faith. Our faith defines who we are and determines the truth that we seek. Sri Krishna goes deeper by explaining there are three kinds of faith according to our temperament and our character. It takes the shape, color, and quality of a mixture of the three gunas. Sattvic people are pure-hearted, selfless, and follow a spiritual path. Now, one can be a lay devotee, be a strong aspirant. One can have tremendous love for one's family, but also one can turn that love into a selfless love and develop spiritually. So no matter what our vocation, you can spiritualize that path. Rajasic individuals are drawn to wealth, power, and pleasure, and place their faith in achieving and pursuing those goals. And when we're young, the whole world is before us. Yes, try your best to reach your material goals. Do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But reserve a part of your life for your spiritual practice. Try to spiritualize every goal in life. Tamasic people may desire pleasure, but are even too lazy to pursue that and are satisfied to remain in ignorance and delusion. And as we go further, we find there are even greater refinements of temperaments based on the gunas. The gunas explain so much. One with a sattvic temperament mixed with rajas has faith in and devotion to God, but also desires pleasures. Yes, a significant number of people do that. Swami Pravrajika explained. However, if sattva predominates, the aspirant will grow in devotion and gradually make God paramount in life. Whereas if rajas predominates, a person is likely to pursue a course of self-aggrandizement that leads ultimately to tamas and to a life of degeneration and even degradation. We must keep a watchful eye. He continues, therefore, according to our temperament and inner development, so is the character of our faith. Sattva mixed with tamas ends up as Sri Ramakrishna's example of Padmalochan in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. It's really a hilarious example. Sri Ramakrishna explained, people used to call him Poto for short. In this village, there was a temple in a very dilapidated condition, Sri Ramakrishna said. It contained no image of God. Aswata and other plants sprang up on the ruins of its walls. Bats lived inside, and the floor was covered with dust and the droppings of the bats. The people of the village had stopped visiting the temple. One day, after dusk, the villagers heard the sound of a conch shell from the direction of the temple. They thought perhaps someone had installed an image in the shrine and was performing the evening worship. One of them softly opened the door and saw Padmalochan standing in a corner, blowing the conch. No image had been set up. The temple hadn't been swept or washed, and filth and dirt lay everywhere. Then he shouted to Poto, "You have set up no image here within the shrine? Oh, you fool! Blowing the conch, you should simply make confusion worse confounded." That's a beautiful example that stays with us. Sattva generates holy thoughts within us, and we feel uplifted by God within us. We feel happy and at peace. If we're sad or despondent, that means we've forgotten or neglected our time with God. But if we then pray intensely to God, our mind will become uplifted and all sadness will disappear. No matter what moods we go through, as an aspirant, we eventually end in sattva. We can always pray for that. What is the culmination of a refined sattvic temperament? The highest love. Love for love's sake. True love. Love because I love you. When we reach this stage in spiritual life, we become bliss-filled. It comes only to those who have intense faith in God, along with a strong desire and effort to realize Him. Those of you who come into spiritual life young, you're blessed indeed because you have that energy within you to seek. Tremendous progress is made according to the effort made. Verses 5 and 6. Shri Krishna speaks to us. You may know these men to be of demonic nature, who mortify the body excessively in ways not prescribed by the scriptures. They do this because their lust and attachment to sense objects have filled them with egotism and vanity. He goes on. In their foolishness, they weaken all their sense organs and outrage me, the dweller within the body. There are often misconceptions about what real austerity is. We all have them when we enter spiritual life. My teacher used to say, once in India, he saw a man who had built a wall around himself. Inside, he could only sit or stand, and he'd made some small holes in walls so he could breathe. Day and night, he sat inside those walls, practicing austerity, which impressed some people who brought food for him. One day, Swami Pravrajika asked Swami Brahmananda, disciple of Sri Ramakrishna and first president of the order, if that man's austerity would bring spiritual results. And Maharaj replied, do you know why he's doing that? Maharaj could look deep into the character of the man. He was an Ishvarakoti. He's not doing it for God. He thinks that by such self-torture, he will gain name and fame in this life. He also has the ulterior motive that after death, he will be reborn as a king and will get greater enjoyments. So that's why various world traditions teach the middle path or the golden mean. In convents and monasteries, when a monk or a nun goes on a particular austerity, he or she seeks the blessings of their community and the permission of the Guru, because without that, the austerity does not come to success. And these austerities are done privately. No outsider will see them. See, there's no show. Swami Shivananda explained what real austerity is. Again, a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. He said, being indifferent to praise and blame, honor and dishonor, and happiness and sorrow, and with the mind fixed on God alone, being immersed in meditation and prayer. This is what is called austerity. Mere self-mortification on the bodily plane is not austerity. Verses 7 to 10, Sri Krishna speaks to us. The food which is agreeable to different men is also of three sorts. So too are the kinds of sacrifice, austerity, and almsgiving. Listen, this is how they may be distinguished. Men of sattva like foods which increase their vital force, energy, strength, and health. Such foods add to the pleasure of physical and mental health. They are juicy, soothing, fresh, and agreeable. But men of rajas prefer foods which are violently bitter, sour, salty, hot, pungent, acid, and burning. These cause ill health and distemper of the mind and body. Sri Krishna continues, and men of tamas take a perverse pleasure in foods which are stale, tasteless, rotten, and impure. They like to eat the leavings of others. So here we find that substantial food gives prolonged sustenance throughout the day. Many of you are young and athletic. You understand the value of good food. Non-substantial food gets quickly digested and provides no energy to the body. Food that's hard to digest weakens the digestive organs and shortens one's lifespan. Swami Chidbhavananda adds in his Gita commentary, time and place have their part to play in food consumption. He said, breakfast should be light. Supper should be adjusted so that during sleep, digestive organs have the needed rest. In cold countries, warm food should be consumed. In hot countries, foods that have a cooling effect should be consumed. Now, every individual is different. Depending on your activities, your age, the type of body you have to adjust according to that. And so you know best, based on your own experience, what works best. Moderation is always good. Verses 11 through 13, Sri Krishna speaks. When men offer sacrifice in accordance with scriptural instructions, and do not desire any advantage for themselves, they are inspired by sattva. Their hearts are set upon the sacrifice for its own sake. An inner sense of duty impels them. But you may be sure that the performance of sacrifice for outward show and in the hope of divine reward is inspired by rajas. When the givers of the sacrifice are inspired by tamas, Sri Krishna continues, they disregard the scriptural instructions. There is no food offering, no prayer or dedication, no gift to the chief priest, and no faith at all. Now we come to the commentary. When men offer sacrifice in accordance with scriptural injunctions. Here the word sacrifice is yajna in Sanskrit and refers to the ancient rites of worship, offerings, oblations, and sacrifice. In this way, devotees communed with God. For example, the Pandava brothers grew up in a princely family, and they were exiled by the jealous Duryodhana in the Gita. Queen Draupadi asked King Yudhishthira, why should these tribulations befall you who are the embodiment of dharma? Yudhishthira replied, behold, O queen, the yonder majestic Himalayas. I can't help adoring them. Sorrow finds no quarters in my mind given this adoration. So this is sattvic austerity. Today, sacrifice generally means an act of charity or social service. Swami Pravrajika explains, when Sri Krishna instructs Arjuna to act in accordance with scriptural injunctions, he means offering everything to God. He instructs Arjuna to perform his duty as an instrument in the hands of God, without feeling himself to be the doer of action. This is karma yoga, very difficult yoga to do correctly and with perfection. It takes a lifetime, surrendering your actions to God, working for God, knowing that you are not the doer. Prabhupada continued, If we as spiritual aspirants can also offer sacrifice in accordance with scriptural injunctions, we will be inspired by sattva, and our actions will be bereft of self-interest. In that way, our offering becomes of real service to others. Not only that, but we grow internally and spiritually. Our character develops, and we begin to reap the rewards internally of spiritual life. Our vision opens up. We feel and experience life in a different way. We live on a different plane. And that is why these yogas are so important for our self-development. Karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, raja yoga. Verses 14 through 17, Sri Krishna speaks to us. Reverence for the devas, the seers, the teachers, and the sages, straightforwardness, harmlessness, physical cleanliness, and sexual purity. These are the virtues whose practice is called austerity of the body. To speak without ever causing pain to another, to be truthful, to say always what is kind and beneficial, and to study the scriptures regularly. This practice is called austerity of speech. The practice of serenity, Sri Krishna goes on, sympathy, meditation upon the Atman, withdrawal of the mind from sense objects, and integrity of motive is called austerity of the mind. When men practice this threefold austerity devotedly, with enlightened faith and no desire for reward, it is said to have the nature of sattva. So these are measures by which we can measure ourselves, where we are and where we wish to go. Spiritual life is always self-evaluation. It's always undertaken with a discriminative eye and mind. Here Sri Krishna explains there are three kinds of austerity: of the body, the speech, and of the mind. When he says reverence for the devas, the seers, the teachers, and the sages is called austerity of the body. It's about the devas. There's a beautiful incident in Swami Vivekananda's life when he was on pilgrimage in the Himalayas with other travelers. He suddenly stopped and asked them, "Did you hear or see anything?" But none of them had heard or seen anything. However, Swami Vivekananda later divulged he had seen a celestial being, a Gandharva, with a beautiful voice and music. And in the Christian tradition, there are angels that come, celestial beings. In every tradition, there are celestial beings that help us on our way. Not to speak of our Guru. Even with the death of the Guru is always with us. The Guru is with the devotee until his or her liberation. It's like an ever-free soul. Stays with the Bodhisattva ideal. The Guru stays with the aspirant until we reach illumination. In regards to reverence for the Guru, the disciples' devotion to the Guru is what opens the spiritual channel for higher knowledge to be transmitted from Guru to disciple. And that channel was open at the time of initiation, when the disciple receives the mantra, the holy mantra, from the teacher. And in our tradition, that mantra comes from Sri Ramakrishna himself. You remember in his life, he practiced many disciplines, all under various gurus. And those names of God, he then transferred to Sri Sarada Devi, all of the mantras, and Sarada Devi in turn to to the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth president of the Brahmakrishna order, and they are brought down in our tradition by word of mouth. So in a sense, our gurus and our acting gurus and our tradition never claimed to be the guru. Sri Ramakrishna is the guru. The power of the mantra comes from him. And that transmission takes place even after the physical death of the guru, right up to the disciples passing and beyond. One long-time Hollywood devotee, and some of you who are new probably don't understand the lineage of our center here. The center was founded by Swami Swahananda, who was then the head of the Vedanta Society of Southern California, the largest center in the United States here. And now Swami Sarvadevananda, his successor, is the head of that center and the head of this center as well. They are the spiritual leaders of this center. One longtime Hollywood devotee, a disciple of Swami Prabhupada, his name was Al Eschner, and he was a former president of our Vedanta Society of Southern California. And he eventually succumbed to dementia. But a day or so before his passing, he was seated, talking, ecstatically thanking and bowing to an invisible presence before him. Yes, yes, he exclaimed reverentially. Thank you. And thus he passed away. This is how it happens. The guru comes for his or her disciple. Harmlessness is another austerity of the body. Jesus called it non-resistance. In Matthew 5:39, he said, "But I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also." Buddha and Mahavira also emphasized non-injury in their teachings. In the Yoga Sutras, chapter 2, verse 30, Patanjali referred to this non-injury as ahimsa. What is the metaphysical science behind this practice? Because the self, the supreme self, dwells in all beings, ahimsa is a safeguard for the practice of cultivating love for the one self in all, even for our enemies. You see, as Vedantas, we can't, rest on our laurels. If we have an enemy, we have to pray for them. We have to try to see God in them as well, not in their actions, but God within them. And the goal is attained by making that the means. And what does that practice lead us to? Swami Prabhupada explained in his Gita commentary. Swami Shivananda, disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, used to bow. He was one of the presidents of the order. He used to bow reverently to those who entered his room, regardless of their caste or spiritual stature. One day his attendant asked why he did this. He said, "When somebody approaches me," Swami explained, "first of all, I see that particular effulgent form of God through which he reveals himself in that particular personality. The persons themselves appear indistinctly like shadowy beings, while the divine aspect itself appears vivid and living. That's why I make my obeisance. The divine forms disappear after my salutation, and then only can I see the human figures distinctly and recognize them as well." How beautiful. What is the outcome when we strive for ahimsa? Swami Sarvananda, disciple of Swami Brahmananda and former head of the Madras Math, once asked Swami Brahmananda, Maharaj, what do you think of Gandhi? And Maharaj answered in English, through sheer force of ethical life, he is knocking at the highest door of spirituality. Truthfulness is one of the austerities of speech. Sri Ramakrishna emphatically stated, truthfulness alone is the spiritual discipline in this age, the Kali Yuga, and also speak the truth, but never a harsh truth. However, the Guru sometimes scolds his or her disciple. That may seem harsh, but it's done out of love, and those scoldings transform the mind of the aspirant. They rework the pathways in the mind. But there is also a special caveat for flattery. Swami Chidbhavananda explains, flattery has to be scrupulously avoided. Even great men have fallen victims to flattery and gone off their moorings. The words uttered ought to be pleasant and beneficial, but never pandering to one's vanity. But what about in business dealings, we might ask? Here, Swami Premananda gives us further direction he learned from his master, Sri Ramakrishna. Where truth reigns, there the Lord himself abides. Then he told the following story. Nag Mahashai, an amazing lay devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, was greatly devoted to truth. Once he went to buy something in the market, and the shopkeeper charged him for annas. As he was truthful, he took the shopkeeper at his word and did not haggle with him. A bystander, seeing him pay the 4 annas, thought to himself, what sort of man is this? He did not even bargain. But when he learned it was Nag Mahashai, the saint who believed no one would dupe others, he took the shopkeeper to task for charging 4 annas for what was worth only 2 annas. The shopkeeper took this to heart. The next day, when Nag Mahashai came to buy something, the shopkeeper charged him only 2 annas for an article worth 5 annas. With folded hands, Nag Mahashai addressed the shopkeeper. Why do you act like this with me? This is worth more than 2 annas. Please charge me the right price. Deeply moved, the shopkeeper fell at the feet of this saint. Thus, Swami Premananda said, you will never lose if you adhere to truth. Hold fast to truth, and divine grace is sure to flow to you through all channels. You will prosper not only in worldly affairs, but in spirituality as well. Truthfulness is so important that our great teachers instruct, never say you will do something if there is any doubt that you cannot, even in insignificant matters. Rather say you will try. That way you adhere to truth. You see? Because it may seem insignificant to you, but a knower of Brahman can tell when you have lied, when you have not kept your word. Once Sri Ramakrishna noticed that Rakal, Swami Brahmananda, the young student at that time, his face had turned black. Nobody else could see this, but Sri Ramakrishna could. And he told Rakal to come to him. Have you told a lie? Rakal said, no. And the master said, think deeply. You must have told a lie somewhere, somehow. Rakal thought and thought, and he said, well, once I said something in jest. And because Rakal was an Ishvarakoti, the master told him, never say an untruth, not even in jest. See, we're not Ishvarakotis, but that is the importance of truthfulness. When you say you're going to be somewhere at a certain time, you must show up. And if you don't, you must alert your host that you're late. You see, then truth follows your words. That is something that is a strength that abides within you, that builds your character. Swami Prabhupada commented, the main truth behind the practices of ahimsa, truthfulness, and serenity is that the Atman resides everywhere. When we keep that in mind, we will know how to conduct ourselves in any circumstance. The Swami added, lastly, sincerity and integrity of motive are essential to spiritual life. He said, once I asked Swami Turiyananda, a direct disciple of Ramakrishna, what is religion? And the Swami answered, to make the heart and the lips the same. Verses 18 and 19. Sri Krishna speaks. Austerity which is practiced out of selfish pride or to gain notoriety, honor, and worship is said to have the nature of rajas. Its effect is not lasting because it lacks resolution. Austerity is said to have the nature of tamas when it is practiced for some foolish purpose or for the excitement of self-torture or in order to harm another person. So here we see that the gunas shape our behavior and character in whatever field of endeavor we enter, including spiritual practice. Rajasic aspirants lose the benefit of tapasya if they undergo sadhana for recognition. Tamastic aspirants foolishly undergo austerities that are excessively body-centered, sometimes to the point of self-torture, or austerities to gain powers, or even to harm others. But the sattvic aspirants practice austerities for God realization alone, and keep your austerities hidden. Don't show them on your sleeve. Don't talk about them to others. Verses 20 to 22, Sri Krishna speaks. A gift may be regarded as proceeding from sattva when it is given to a deserving person at a suitable time and in a fit place, not because of past benefits or in the hope of a future reward, but simply because the giver knows that it is the right for him to give. Continues, whatever is given in the hope of a like return or with any other selfish motive or reluctantly may be known to proceed from rajas. Sri Krishna continues, from tamas comes the gift which is given to an unworthy person at the wrong time and in the wrong place, disdainfully, without regard for the feelings of him who receives it. So in these verses, we understand again how the three gunas not only make up our psychophysical being, but also manifest in all our thoughts, words, and deeds. For example, Swami Vivekananda explains, the Gita says that there are three kinds of charity: the tamasic, the rajasic, and the sattvic. Tamasic charity is performed on an impulse. It is always making mistakes. The doer thinks of nothing but his own impulse to be kind. Rajasic charity is what a man does for his own glory, and sattvic charity is that which is given to the right person in the right way and at the proper time. He thus goes so far as to say, for my own part, I have been learning that even charity can go too far. So when we understand the forces of the gunas and see how they operate within ourselves, for better or for worse, we can then cultivate the right gunas to counteract and overcome our shortcomings in order to progress spiritually. Our duty in spiritual life is not to look for the faults of others, but to try to understand our own motives. The more we meditate, the more we practice mindfulness, the more we understand the inner workings of the human mind. And when we understand the workings of our own mind, we understand better the workings of other minds as well. And we feel compassion for others. See, this Raja Yoga is a science. We enter into the laboratory of our own mind and discern what is going on, and that way we can self-correct. We can then cultivate the right gunas to counteract and overcome our shortcomings in order to progress spiritually. And our understanding of the three gunas also gives us insight into the actions of others. As Vivekananda so beautifully expressed, he said, "As I grow older, I find that I look more and more for greatness in little things. I want to know what a great man eats and wears and how he speaks to his servants." So our spiritual practices should be performed in order to become established in sattva. To further this goal, Sri Krishna prescribes self-control and meditation. After much effort, when we are finally established in sattva, it predominates in both our mind and our body. It does work. There's a story of a wonderful devotee I heard recently in one of our centers. Very energetic. But when she misses the shrine in the morning, she becomes much more aggressive. So what does her guru tell her? You come not only in the evening, but you begin again coming in the morning. So in the morning and in the evening. And that way, her character changed. She became more moderate. The spiritual life does work, my child. My teacher often said to us, it does work. Verses 23 through 27. We're getting to the end here. Om Tat Sat. These three words designate Brahman, by whom the seers, the Vedas, and the sacrificial rites were created in ancient times. Therefore, Om is always uttered by the devotees of Brahman. As the scriptures direct, before undertaking any act of sacrifice, almsgiving, or austerity, Tat, meaning the absolute, is uttered by seekers after liberation who desire no reward for their deed when they are about to make sacrifice or give alms or practice some austerity. Sat means goodness and existence itself. It also means an auspicious act. All perseverance in sacrifice, austerity, or almsgiving is Sat. All actions dedicated to Brahman are Sat. So here, Om Tat Sat is a sacred mantra. Each letter, A, U, M, indicates its three manifestations, gross, subtle, or causal, and the whole syllable represents Turiya, which means the absolute. Om is the ultimate reality, both the personal God and the impersonal truth. Tat means that, it refers to the absolute. Sat means existence itself. Everything phenomenal exists because of that Sat, existence itself. Without Sat, there would be no other existence. That Sat is what sustains you and me. Without that Sat, that absolute existence, we could not think, we could not feel, we could not talk, we could not love. Swami Pravrajika explained, as we utter the word Om, we must try to feel its visible, perceptible presence. As Swami Vivekananda expressed at one time, do not seek for him, just see him. What a wonderful truth. Where do we seek him? God is everywhere. We must learn to believe that, to feel that, to sense that, and to see that. How to attain consciousness of the divinity in all? Our teachers tell us the secret is to try to remember Om Tat Sat in every thought and action. Swami Swahananda once told me, he said, Swami Triyananda used to say Hari Om, before doing any particular action. He said, I also like to say that. Just the very act of saying it brings the mind back to God. Sri Ramakrishna exemplified this practice in his life. Whenever he went to sit somewhere, to touch something, or to eat food, he would say Om Tat Sat. In this way, he would see God everywhere and would have his consciousness in God. These are all practices that help to stabilize our spiritual life. Whenever someone impure would approach him, he would also utter Om Tat Sat, and thus bring out the divinity in that person. So also, as we develop in our spiritual lives, we can learn to evoke inner goodness in those around us. Yes, spiritual life does work. Therefore, Om is always uttered by the devotees of Brahman, Sri Krishna says. Om may be uttered mentally or verbally. If the mind is too agitated or dull, we can chant Om out loud, which will gradually bring the mind under control. Now, one must never utter one's mantra out loud in the presence of others. It is always to be kept secret, sacred, and hidden within. That way it grows within us. Otherwise it becomes dissipated. This is a different matter. Om Tat Sat is not your mantra that you receive from the Guru. Tat, meaning the absolute, is uttered by seekers after liberation, Krishna says. An action becomes selfless when we offer it by uttering Om Tat, which means I offer to him, to that. That meaning the supreme, the absolute. Sat means goodness and existence. Here, Sat means an auspicious act because with pure existence comes purity itself. That act is, in truth, existence itself, and with pure existence comes purity. The last verse, Sri Krishna says, if a man performs any act of sacrifice, or gives any gift, or practices any austerity without directing his faith and will toward Brahman, then what he does is asat, unreal. It cannot produce any good result, either in this world or the next. So if we fail to imbue our spiritual practices with faith, our actions remain karma rather than karma yoga, which transforms us. Therefore, we must strive to associate every thought and action with the consciousness of God. It's a tall order, no doubt, but we must try. And as we struggle to receive that grace, Swami Brahmananda assures us, the breeze of grace is always blowing. Unfurl our sails. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.